This is a photo of Tylee Ryan and J.J. Vallow. They're in Yellowstone. This is the last known photo of Tylee Ryan before she is murdered. Standing beside her is her uncle Alex Cox. The person taking the photo is her mother, Lori Vallow. The evil standing beside these two children. Welcome to Chasing the Murder, and we are on part 158 of Life Beyond the Grave, which is covering the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell story, Doomsday Serial Killers. So we'll start off here. On September 8th, Alex Cox, Lori Vallow take JJ and Tylee to Yellowstone. It appears to be an innocent family trip. Most family trips are full of fun, excitement. Tylee thinks it's just a normal day, most likely. But Lori, her brother Alex Cox, well, they're saying their last goodbyes to Tylee because they know just hours from now she won't be on this earth any longer. Just a quick recap. Chad, Lori's lover, sat at his PC and searched wind direction for September 9th of 2019, while his wife Tammy had no idea about their very dark plans. She had no idea that her husband Chad was living this double life, one of walking under God and the other evil, working for the devil. Just before the family takes that trip to Yellowstone, Lori and Chad are at the temple, most likely preparing for their mission. Tammy, she's upgrading her insurance. It's definitely premeditated stuff, guys. Chad and Lori had planned for all of this to go down perfectly. I really can't believe that Lori and Chad were not even concerned that Tammy might find out that they were being seen at the temple together. And what is their purpose at this temple? Well, we have learned that, especially through Charles, Tylee, Tammy, that many times they'll go to the temple to get information on what their next plan is for their mission. And so they claim that they have heavenly support helping them plan these murders. Remember, they're zombies and they have the responsibility of dealing with all the zombies on this earth as the second coming approaches. One zombie has already been taken down. That's Charles Vallow. And Tylee Ryan was now the second target and zombie before they moved to their third. Alex Cox has his phone with him at Yellowstone, and investigators would actually use his phone and follow the breadcrumbs to kind of put together a story of what they think happened to Tylee Ryan. 11:32 a.m., September 8th. Alex Cox's phone leaves Rexburg Maverick convenience store. His phone is actually tracked and going to the west entrance of Yellowstone. Investigators later discover that they take JJ to ride a few rides and they walk around the park. In security footage later, they notice that the family is walking around the boardwalk of the Old Faithful around 3 p.m. that day. Also, according to investigators, after they go to a cafeteria, they leave there, head back down that boardwalk towards Old Faithful, where Lori takes a few photos of the children. That's approximately around 3:49 p.m. that evening. The creepiest thing about this photo for me is knowing that they look happy. But this is the last photo of Tylee Ryan alive. Looking closely at the photo, and what I notice about Tylee Ryan is how her cheeks are very rosy. Her eyes seem a little glossed over, yet she's trying to have a good time. JJ appears to be fine. Shortly after this picture was taken, the family loads up in the vehicle and heads back to Rexburg, Idaho. Detectives believe that Tylee Ryan made it back to her townhome. She was alive. But what happened that night and the next morning is unclear. We'll go into more specific details later on, but just know Alex Cox spends many nights over at his sister's apartment up until midnight, except for 2 nights in September. On September 8th, going into September 9th, Alex Cox is there until approximately 2:30 that morning. It's one of the nights that he's there past midnight before he goes back to his apartment. And we'll go into these details later. We're going to go ahead and jump into the early morning of September 9th. In Special Agent Rick Wright's testimony, he explains to us how difficult it was for all these agents and investigators to put together the puzzle when Alex Cox is over at Chad Daybell's property where they believe Tylee Ryan may have been murdered. He's talking about that residence and Alex Cox and Chad Daybell, September 9th, 2019.
Between about approximately a 2.5 hour period, there were numerous data points generally around the Daybell residence. There were only 4 of fairly great precision. One was at 9:21, one was at 9:22, one was at 10:39, and one was at 10:57. Now, the first data point that we got at 9:21 is actually behind the main residence at the Daybell property, back on the rear of the property, and that is a GPS coordinate with a 6-meter radius. And then at 9:22, we get another one that's actually on the northwest corner of the Daybell residence, near a gate there. And that is also a GPS data point with a 3-meter radius. And we have a gap in time where we don't have any precise information, but until 10:39, when there's another data point, also a GPS data point that's behind the residence, and this has a 43-meter radius. And then at 10:57, there's another also behind the residence with a 5-meter radius, also GPS. As best I could determine, it seems like the device is leaving that area of the residence at approximately 11:45. I actually see briefly, it seems to drive north from the residence, the opposite direction of Rexburg, for just a minute or two. Maybe goes about a block north shortly before 11:45, and then it seems to turn around and then begin traveling south. So it may have left the Daybell residence just a few minutes before 11:45. But by 11:45, it is driving southbound back into Rexburg, and its next stop is at 11:52 in northern part of Rexburg at Del Taco at 568 North 2nd East, where it stays for about 10 minutes.
So we learned that Alex Cox heads over to Chad Daybell's property, and it is believed that Tylee Ryan is with him. We don't know if she's alive or not. 9:21 a.m. Alex Cox is pinging on Chad's property, just behind the house near the east end of the barn. They are now approximately 8 miles from Lori's townhome. Whatever happened to Tylee most likely happened in between that time frame, between 9:21 a.m. approximately 10:39 a.m. Again, this is broad daylight. So the only place that they can remain hidden is that little barn area right there. Give us an idea that there's a possibility that Tylee Ryan could have been in that barn. But that's pure speculation. Whatever happened to Tylee didn't seem to affect Alex Cox's appetite. He's at Del Taco. So that's around 11:52. Around 11:53. One of the biggest pieces of evidence in this case, a text from Chad Daybell to his wife at 11:53 a.m. September 9th. This text police will not discover until nearly 8 months after Lori Vallow was arrested. So here's testimony on that, but I want to share something real quick. So, May, they get some data points and GPS information on Chad Daybell's property, but don't understand what it might mean. And in January of 2020, January 3rd, they, after confiscating the device off of the Daybell property, they discover this important text that we're talking about that describes what Chad Daybell had plans for that day and his experiences that seemed to be false. It's obvious that Chad Daybell and Alex Cox believe that they are smarter than anyone, and he thought that he most likely was making perfect excuses for all the activity going on that property that day, September 9th of 2019. But it was his biggest fail. All right, let's listen to some of this. Take it away, Agent Rick Wright.
Yes, I did.
And did you review it as initially pulled from the device and provided to you?
Yes.
Was this one of those messages?
Yes. So, analyst Ben Dean contacted me on June 1st of 2020 and indicated that he had found a text message on the device, and also based on the review he was conducting, that it appeared to be a device that Tammy Daybell had used before her death.
And could you read this message into the record?
Yes. This message appeared on the device on September 9th at 11:53 a.m. And it was a text message from a device attributed to Chad Daybell, and it came into that device for Tammy Daybell. And the text message read, "Well, I've had an interesting morning. I felt I should burn all of the limb debris by the fire pit before it got too soaked by the coming storms. While I did so, I spotted a big raccoon along the fence. I hurried and got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. He is now in our pet cemetery. Fun times."
And in this, do you see the reference to a fire pit?
Yes, I do.
Did you determine if there was a fire pit on the Daybell property?
Yes, I did.
And looking back at that previous slide, and again, these data points are from September 9th of 2019.
Yes.
Did you learn anything in relation to that cluster of red dots?
Yes. So, subsequently, I had been to that location on January 3rd of 2020 for the first time. I'd been on the property and had walked much of the outer property as well, but it was under snow at the time. And then subsequently a search was conducted on June 9th at that location. And I was also present, and I'm aware there is a fire pit on the property. And although I don't have it marked on here, it's approximately in this area.
So around the same area as those data points?
Yes, in the vicinity, yes.
Do you know what was ultimately found near those data points?
So at a nearby location to the fire pit, investigators approximately in this area were able to recover human remains that had been buried.
Do you know who those human remains were ultimately determined to be?
Yes, they were Tylee Ryan.
So where are we in the timeline here for Kay Woodcock? Well, she's still begging the police to look into the fact that Charles' death was not in self-defense. It was in fact a murder. They're trying to figure out where Lori Vallow is. As they do, you have Alex Cox and Chad Daybell carrying out the murder of a teenager, an innocent teenager. Now, because the Idaho investigators were not aware of exactly what's going on during this time with Lori Vallow, this sadly gives them this huge amount of time to continue to wreak havoc on people's lives. Now, Chad had texted his wife and thought he was being slick, saying that he had to burn some limbs and that he shot a raccoon. Now, way later, investigators try to investigate what happened on September 9th, but it's kind of hard to do 8 months later. So the best we could do was take the information that we had and try to put it together. Had Tylee Ryan been shot? We know that they did, in fact, place that teenager into that fire pit. But haven't you ever wondered how they were able to do that in the daylight? Since it was September, the ground was not frozen most likely. They were able to probably dig down deep enough to kind of hide her underneath the earth. And there's one satellite picture that kind of suggests this, but this is speculation. But still, how in the world could you get away with doing something so openly? And the things that they did to Tylee Ryan is sickening, and we will go into those details later. Chad Daybell had visions to go to this area. What area is he living in? Salem. What does Salem stand for? Well, Salem has a history with being connected to Jerusalem. Chad believed that this land that he was on, even with Julie Rowe, we're going to go over this shortly as well, was meant for greater things and for the works of Christ. He believed that the New Jerusalem was going to be built on his property as well as the surrounding properties. Guys, bear with me. I have the flu. I cannot fight it, it seems, and my voice is just a mess. Now, something's important to note, I think, and we got some of this information during the testimony of Chad's daughter, Emma Daybell. My apologies, and as well as his son, other people that knew him, saying that killing animals seemed to be a regular routine for the Daybells. Was that an excuse to make up for the dad using a gun on the raccoon? Because evidence, what we know right now in the pet cemetery, they didn't find that much there. And the person most responsible for the pet cemetery was Tammy Daybell herself.
Around the property. Can you elaborate a little bit about what your mother's primary interest and role was in terms of the outdoors?
She loved to nurture things, so taking care of animals and gardening and growing plants. She really wanted to have a strawberry patch and raspberries. She liked cute little critters like ducks and chickens and rabbits. She would take care of them.
Now, in terms of managing the pet cemetery, was that your father's role or your mother's role to manage that?
My mother's.
Okay, and she was the one primarily responsible?
Yes.
So your father didn't necessarily go there and participate in anything with the pet cemetery. Would that be fair?
Yes, that's fair.
Okay, so anything that changed or anything that was modified in terms of the pet cemetery, would your mother be aware of it?
She would be aware.
Okay. And you recall that you've seen some evidence, actually the news, it's been all over the news.
Well, this even makes it more suspicious. I don't know why they thought this testimony would help, because why would Chad have to text his wife if he's going to mess around with a pet cemetery that belongs to her that she messes with? Well, he needs an excuse. Let's listen into Emma's truth or non-truth, because we don't know if she ever tells the truth about animals on their property.
You mentioned that you lived kitty corner to the your dad's house. Is that correct?
Yes.
And has there been occasions when you folks have also encountered issues with animals on the property?
Yes.
And in some of those instances, were those animals buried as a result of being shot?
Yes.
On your property?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have any knowledge about animals being shot on your dad's property as a result of issues with either livestock or otherwise?
Yes.
Okay. And some of the animals that were on your father's property at the time, can you go through the list of different type of animals that were on your father's property at that time?
There were a lot of cats. We live right by a busy highway, and so all throughout there's stray cats that get hit, and my mother would feel bad for them, and they weren't even our cat, and they'd get buried. And some pet dogs, raccoons, skunks, rabbits, ducks, chickens, sometimes sparrows even too.
And your mother was a kind and considerate person.
Yes.
And she felt that that was the reason for why she erected the pet cemetery. Is that correct?
Even if it was a pest animal, she didn't want them to be disrespected.
Another interesting fact we learned from this testimony is how Chad Daybell did not like dogs. And the fact that she says that he had nothing to do with the pet cemetery in most cases, said that Tammy would be responsible for burying things there. I think that was his intentions of, getting the jury to think in that manner. If anything was buried there, it wouldn't be Chad, would it? But Chad ultimately pretty much designed that day, September 9th, that is in fact what he did with this raccoon he shot in the middle of the day. Now, they're saying that Tammy was very aware of her pet cemetery. Garth would say that she did like to work in the yard, but really, there's nothing in the yard that shows any evidence where there's an everyday occurrence of such activities from Tammy Daybell.
You mentioned that you lived kitty corner to your dad's house. Is that correct?
Yes.
And has there been occasions when you folks have also encountered issues with animals on the property?
Yes.
And in some of those instances, were those animals buried as a result of being shot?
Yes.
On your property?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have any knowledge about animals being shot on your dad's property as a result of issues with either livestock or otherwise?
Yes.
Okay. And some of the animals that were on your father's property at the time, can you go through the list of different type of animals that were on your father's property?
Okay, well, it's very concerning me to hear that this family has this big thing of killing animals that they can deem pests for coming on their property looking for dinner. They're not big farmers. This isn't animals that's going to make a huge impact on their economic success at all. So how is it that shooting a raccoon that is creeping for a few eggs is going to be a big deal? And how many are there? It just seems like this is something he looks forward to. He enjoys doing, and he's looking for an excuse to shoot an animal. Those are important traits to many killers that we've heard about in the past. So Chad Daybell didn't have a soft spot for animals. He loved taking their lives. He expected everyone around him to agree that this was not a big deal and just a normal part of life. So right now you have Tylee Ryan, who has been murdered in cold blood by Chad Daybell, Alex Cox, and her own mother, Lori Vallow. We know that they had put her remains into this fire. I myself was not impressed with the forensics on this case. They couldn't figure out whether she was dismembered before or after she was put into this fire. In any case, Tylee Ryan would have been dismembered in some way. What they did said, and we'll share more on this later, is they believe that Tylee was dismembered prior to being placed on the fire or near to the time of death. Her left hip had multiple sharp traumas, 5 traumas on the left side. There's another clue this day. In fact, it comes from Chad Daybell's son, Garth Daybell. He actually sees his dad this day. And we're going to talk more on that the next upload. This is because I'm losing my voice it's not doing too well. I want to say, guys, if you like my videos, make sure that you like, subscribe, share, and comment. Love you guys, and I'll see you guys soon.